Rain whispered against the slate-shingled roofs of Winterfell as the scent of hoarfrost drifted across the courtyard, the chill merging with the smoke of the forges to fill the keep with memories older than stone. Arya Stark stood just inside the great doors of the hall, the rough wool of her gown itching her shoulders, the silver dire wolf stitched across her breast glinting in the torchlight. The robe felt strange, too heavy and stiff, as though woven from her own cage. But Maester Luwin's words pressed in her ears. "The North needs a Stark it can see, child. A blade does little good if the hand that guides it is absent." She had answered with the faint nod expected of a dutiful daughter, though her mind raced between restless paths. Southward with father and Sansa, northward with Jon Snow, outward with her nameless dreams of swords and far horizons. Yet the raven on the rookery's sill had croaked portent that morning, black wings beating like iron between the clouds, and in that wing stroke the course of her life bent, silent as snow on moss. Ned Stark, leaving for King's Landing, had laid a hand on her shoulder and given her a charge. "Guard Winterfell for me until I return." He spoke lightly, not foreseeing the trap closing around his honor, but the small weight of his trust set in her chest with the permanence of a whispered vow. While Bran climbed spires and Rickon chased wolves, Arya paced the battlements. Sir Roderick Castle, grey of beard and broad of heart, began instructing her in keep lore rather than swordplay. He made her walk the storerooms with parchment and charcoal, counting sacks of barley, wheels of hard cheese, tallow candles, links of smoked sausages strung from oaken beams. He spoke of the measure of winter, of how strong castles starve from within, not from breach of wall. She listened with the uneasy patience of a colt fitted for its first bit. Each tally marked the inches closing about her, yet she found, almost against her will, a strange satisfaction in the order wrought by those numbers, the quiet mastery over hunger and flame. When the ravens began arriving from the riverlands with news of father's arrest, the weight of Winterfell's stones seemed to double. Corridors she had raced through in child's games now felt like ancient, echoing vaults that demanded her voice not in laughter, but in command. Catelyn had ridden south already in search of allies. Robb gathered banners at Moat Cailin, and old Nan rocked near the hearth muttering of snow spiders, big as hounds. In the absence of all others, the eyes of Winterfell turned to Arya. She stood in the hall where banners stirred and mead fumes lingered, her voice skimming over the reeds of her fear as she ordered barley released for the small folk whose stores had failed in an early frost. She sent the blacksmith's younger son with copper nails and rawhide to mend a broken village palisade. She visited those who had never before seen a Stark so small in stature, and returned at dusk with her cheeks stung scarlet by the gratitude that burned more fiercely than any victory at arms. Yet there were nights when, in the hush after fires were banked, Arya slipped outside the broken elder gate and sparred alone against the northern wind. Her wooden practice sword, gift from Jon years past, hummed through sleet like a tune half forgotten, yet never quite lost. Under the gray arch of sky, she wrote her lingering longing for battle in sweeps and thrusts that left her breath pluming silver. Ghosts of water dancers and Braavosi whispers haunted her footwork, but each dawn she hid the sword away and returned to her new mantle, breathing the lie of lace-bound serenity until the lie grew roots. The raven that brought word of Lord Eddard's execution pierced Winterfell with a cry no walls could mute. The parchment crackled in Maester Luwin's trembling fingers, and the world shrank to the single stroke of wax sealing the Lannister lion. Robb was already across the neck with his army. Catelyn rode in his wake. Sir Roderick's hand lay on Arya's shoulder as the hall leaned around them. Somewhere distant a hound howled, and the sound tunneled through stone like a spear. She did not faint. She did not scream. She folded the letter once, twice, until her nails broke through the edges. Then she turned to the hearth and laid it in the flames, where it shuddered, curled, and became ash. When she faced the onlookers again, the tears unshed rhymed her lashes like frost. "Winterfell endures," she said, hearing her own voice as though from the ribs of a hollow beast. "And so shall we." That winter bit early, white and cruel. Snow crusted the high road, stilling trade. Fisherfolk on the White Knife found their nets frozen in mere hours. Mothers eyed their larders between fits of silent prayer. Arya sat long with Maester Luwin, quill scratching along parchment, as they revised rations. 3/4 loaves for households with 2 mouths or fewer, half loaves where there were more than 5. Each decision carved her heart thinner than a reed, but when she walked the yard, she held her chin steady so hope could rest upon it. She dispatched silent sisters with covered wagons to outlying steads. Food and salves bound beneath the faith sigils, to maintain the fiction that charity flowed from the Sep 80, not from a girl who now dreamed in ledger columns. Theon Greyjoy returned that spring in oiled mail, flanked by Ironborn whose eyes dared the walls to stand against salt and storm. Robb's summons lay unanswered across the Green Fork. Theon spoke honey and vinegar, claiming to keep Winterfell in Robb's name, yet his hand strayed often to the dirk at his belt. Arya welcomed him with meat and ale, her smile slim as a blade's edge. At dusk she stood upon the battlements, breathing the tar scent of his ships drawn up along the banks like dark teeth. She remembered Theon's laughter from childhood, how he had once hoisted her onto a horse too wild for her feet. Gone now. In its place a softer cruelty, half regret, half ambition. She slipped through corridors that night, mapping his guards with steps learned in quieter, sharper dreams. When the betrayal came, it came in smoke and sudden steel. The horn blasts, the creak of oaken bars yielding from within. Ironborn flooding the yard with war shrikes echoing across moonlit snow. Arya's guard of 20 men, sworn to her alone, closed in a ring about the great hall, while women and children were shepherded into the crypts on secret routes Bran had once explored. She addressed the invaders from atop the stony stair of the keep, voice carrying through fireglow. Winterfell kneels to no Reaver's crown. Name your ransom, if gold is what you seek. My brother rides to war, and I speak with his voice. Theon answered with a threat of steel and flame. Yet when he saw the torches begin to die where oil should have fed them, seeds of doubt flickered behind his bravado. Arya had ordered every lamp trimmed lean, every cache of pitch replaced with snow-soaked sand. The Ironborn torches guttered, smothered by their own smoke, and in the darkness her loyal men struck. What followed was no courtly duel, but a chaos of choking shadows, steel drawn by half-light, walls echoing the coppery wet thud of fate. Arya herself slipped through the melee, finding Theon by the wagon arch, Sir Roderick's blood fresh on his axe. She raised no sword, only met his eyes, and in his falter, his recognition that this ragged girl still knew him enough to condemn him, he lost the step needed to parry Sir Roderick's second squire, who drove a spear clean through his thigh. Theon fell, howling, and the Ironborn broke with him. At dawn, she stood above the yard where corpses lay stiffening in snow turned pink. Her breath a ragged swirl. She spared Theon, binding him to a cell beneath the library tower, where salt air could not reach. Mercy, Maester Luwin counseled, might keep blood feud with the Iron Islands from leeching generations. Yet Arya watched the tide of Theon's tears, with the same detached sorrow she bore the winter fields. Compassion had become a measured thing, doled in increments, never free, never uncounted. That night, by the weirwood, she whispered a litany she had once recited with vengeance in every syllable, the names of those who had wronged her family. But she let each name slip like snow through open fingers, until only one remained, Arya Stark. She forgave the child she no longer was, then opened her eyes to the ancient face of the tree, and for the first time felt its red leaves bend not toward blood, but toward belonging. Letters arrived bearing broken seals, Robb's crown on parchment, Robb's desperation between cramped lines. He had won whispering victories along the Green Fork, yet every mile south cost him men and grain. When he asked Winterfell for more soldiers, Arya read the plea thrice. They had boys of 14 who shaved still soft cheeks, men too old to string a bow. But Robb was king in the north, and winter or no, the crown's burden rested on every Stark. She called the lords of the Winter Hills and Barrow Downs to council in the hall, where father once judged disputes over cattle. There she spoke of duty, broad as the barons, of how the north would stand, or fall not with swords alone, but with the hearts behind them. In the end, she sent only 200, seasoned men who volunteered knowing what price likely waited. But she sealed each helm with black wool lining to ward frost, and she gave them the fattest horses remaining. She also sent letters to the Cranningmen, to House Manderley, to every lesser banner who yet hoarded grain behind palisades, demanding they feed the realm Robb fought to protect. And they did, for the letters bore the seal of Winterfell and the name of its lady, and the North still remembered the taste of stark justice. Seasons heaved forward. Birds flew south and returned again. Ice rind cracked, barley shot green. Tales of wolf banners among the whispering woods traveled on merchant tongues. Between those rumors arrived darker tidings: Renly's ghost, Stannis fires, King Joffrey's cruelty blossoming in black armor. Through it all, Arya listened at council tables and in the kitchens, measuring every scrap of news the way one gauges the depth of a thawing pond before setting foot to cross. Her name began to appear in the songs of northern bards. Lady of Winterfell, she-wolf of quiet flame, but she sat apart when minstrels plucked their strings, for the song spoke of grace and fierce beauty and iron courtesy, never of the nights she spent rocking Rickon through his terrors, or the mornings she retched behind the kennels, the sourness of dawn and anxiety mingling on her tongue. Those truths belonged only to her and to the keep's cold stones, who asked no payment but endurance. When the letter came bearing news of Robb's death at the Twins, it arrived bled upon by the writer's own heart. He had raced through the night, spurred by fear and grief, and his horse collapsed within the gate, issuing breath that drifted away like lost spirits. Arya knelt over him, prying the letter from his rigid fingers. She did not wait for Maester Luwin to speak the words aloud. She recognized the Bolton sigil in the wax, the phrase watery seals, and the press of a lion's paw faint beneath them. Alliances coiling like thorns around her brother's crown. She closed her eyes, and Ned Stark's voice returned from memory. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. She opened her eyes and rose, not alone. Behind her stood every face Winterfell sheltered, sworn by grain or blood. The rider died within the hour, his name sung in the Godswood that evening, and by sunrise, red banners of Bolton treachery flew above the Dreadfort, yet the dire wolf remained over Winterfell. The Boltons marched soon after, eager to seize the empty husk they imagined Winterfell to be. But Arya had prepared for more than loaves and ledgers. While the snows still lay thick, she ordered trenches carved beyond the outer walls, filled them with brush, pitch, and frozen rushes. She had water from the hot springs piped beneath the drifts, so that come thaw, the ground would churn to unexpected mud, mired enough to swallow cavalry to the girth. She trained the women to string longbows and fletch arrows, trained the children to carry signals between towers, trained the old men to sharpen spikes until their palms bled. And she herself rode each dusk along the ramparts, gray winds surviving pups loping restless at her heels, their eyes feral with the memory of pack. When the Bolton vanguard crested the ridge, they beheld not a cringing, starving keep, but a bastion alive with the hum of ready hearts. They besieged her, ringed Winterfell in torches, set their camp beyond bowshot, and waited for hunger to do what iron could not. But Arya remembered the stories of Sir Roderick's father, who once held Winterfell against Skagosi rebels for 2 whole years. The inner cellars bristled with salted pork, fish packed in rock salt, wheels of goat cheese, and casks of honey mead sealed in pitch. The library tower hosted a still churning out spirit from fermented root vegetables, a trick taught by a steward who claimed it kept men's spirits hotter than hearth fires. Weeks passed. The Boltons' banners sagged under wind that cut like knives. Wolves circled their horses at night, and fear grew fat in their bellies while Arya's people warmed themselves on thick stew and secret laughter. One night, under moon bitten sharp as ice, Arya donned gray cloak and slipped out beneath the postern gate with a score of silent volunteers. They crossed the moat where boiling water flowed beneath crusted snow. Crawling on elbows through the dark, they reached the trenches filled with the enemy's own cast-off straw and wastes. Torches kissed those dry heaps, flames roared. The trenches Arya had prepared in winter now burned around the Boltons' camp, a serpent of fire writ in their own refuse, trapping them against Winterfell's walls. Bolts from hidden perches found the gaps in mailed necks. Wolves, coaxed by raw venison the children had nightly thrown, surged from the woods hungry for softer throats. By dawn, the Bolton banners were ash, their sworn men scattered like wheat before scythe. Ramsay Snow himself was found bound in his gilt-edged armor, hounded into a mire beyond the West Watch. Arya watched him dragged to the courtyard, remembering the stories of his flayed victims. She ordered no torture, only a hole cut through the ice of the hot springs runoff, and there she had him cast, bound still, left to sink in water far warmer than the welcome he had planned for Winterfell. Peace, when it arrived, did not trumpet. It crept soft as moss across the cracks war had wrought. Lords Dustin, Serwyn, and Tallheart rode to Winterfell, carrying the broken haft of Robb's greatsword, and laid it at Arya's feet, swearing to follow whichever course she charted for the north. She accepted their pledges with measured grace, but privately she spent that night by the Godswood pool, fingers brushing the water where red leaves drifted like drops of heart's blood. She wept for Robb, for Sansa lost to southern intrigue, for Bran's bright laughter swallowed by broken bones, and for the child who once chased cats through the Red Keep, dreaming of water dancing. In the hush of pre-dawn, she spoke aloud to the heart tree. I have given Winterfell all of me. May it give me back enough to remain myself. The weirwood answered only with wind, but that wind carried the scent of coming spring. In the years that followed, when southern kings shifted like smoke on sand and Queen Daenerys broke the wheel only for others to mend it, Arya Stark ruled the north from a hall, rebuilt in cedar and gray stone. Her council chamber was lined not with tribute blades, but with maps of irrigation channels, grain routes, and herbal gardens beneath glass roofs, warmed by hot springs. She established schools in Carhold and Bear Island, where girls learned letters and archery in equal measure. She abolished the practice of pit justice, replacing it with traveling judges who bore her seal and answered only to the laws first drafted by her father. She married not for alliance but for affection late found, Torhen Mormont, whose laughter echoed Jon Snow's in timbre and courage, and bore 2 children, Lyanna and Eddard, who grew amid wolves and crow calls and stories of southern oceans they might one day see. But sometimes, when frost silvered the courtyard and the clang of practiced swords reached her solar, Arya would pause by the window. She would lift the wooden blade Jon had carved her, polished now smooth by years of handling. She would trace its blunt edge and remember that other life tugging beneath her skin like a ghost. Arya the stray cat racing through Braavosi streets. Arya the girl of many faces. Arya the dagger in the dark. She wondered who that shadow would have become, roaming beyond the narrow sea. Then she would press the blade back onto its bracket, turn, and step into the corridor where stewards waited with petitions and children giggled over lessons. For there were many kinds of blades, she had learned, and some carved not flesh but futures. When at last Jon Snow returned from the farthest reaches of legend, a king unkinged, a man remade in loss, he came to Winterfell riding a shaggy gray horse older than most campaigns. His arrival stirred the keep with whispers, but Arya met him in the courtyard with no pomp, only the embrace of one who had too few reconnections left. They walked the ramparts above a field where barley stood taller than a man's waist. Jon looked over the green and gold waves, then at his sister, the lady he had last seen as a tousled girl, dreaming of swords. You forged a realm from winter's bones, he said quietly, and bled none but your own heart to do it. Arya's gaze drifted toward the distant tree line where faint silhouettes of direwolves paced, guardians still bound by pack. I had teachers, she murmured, thinking of Ned and Catelyn, of Maester Luwin's gentle sternness, of Sir Roderick's calloused patience, of every child and widow who had leaned on Winterfell when hope thinned like gruel. They taught me that a knife can kill a foe, but a hearth can save a kingdom. Jon laughed, rough and low. Father would have liked that. She turned to him with a half smile, one eyebrow crooked, as if still skeptical any Stark could ever truly rest. Father would have put you to work sweeping the yard for such sentiment. Come, there's stew on the fire, and the children would meet their uncle who lives in songs. He offered his arm, She placed her hand upon it, guiding him down the stair where torches burned steady despite the wind. As evening fell, music rose from the hall, a reel older than dragons, while the Lady of Winterfell listened to the pulse of hoofbeats in the distance, each thud a promise that roads yet led outward for those bold enough to follow. But her path was inward, earthbound, carved of duty and gentler dreams. And when moonlight silvered the snow melt pooling along the battlements, it caught upon the threads of her gown. Wolf's head sigil bright as a flame banked for the night, proof that even hardened steel, when poured into new molds, could shape worlds as surely as any whispering blade. Ah, kai. Ah, nay. The scent of pine resin and damp earth drifted into the high window of Arya's solar, borne on a wind that knew the taste of distant glaciers. She sat at a broad oaken table strewn with ravens' parchments, reports of fisheries reopening along the shivering sea, requests for seed grain from hill clans, a note in Sansa's elegant hand describing Queen Daenerys' latest council in the capital. Candles guttered in iron sconces, their light bright enough to trace fine silver threads in Arya's dark hair. 20 years had passed since the Bolton siege. Time seldom announced itself in her reflection. She dressed plainly, moved with the wiry economy of a bowstring. But it lived in those pale strands, in a softness about her gaze that no one mistook for weakness. A soft knock sounded. She marked her place with a sliver of driftwood and called for entry. Jory Umber ducked inside, broad shoulders filling half the doorway. He carried a leather satchel smelling of salt and long roads. "They've returned, my lady," he said, eyes bright beneath shaggy red brows. "Lyanna's expedition from Hardhome. All of them. Nenarau." The chill that had lodged beneath Arya's breast since her daughter's departure loosened its claws. She rose, rolling the tension from her shoulders in a movement so fluid it startled even Jory, who had seen her drill with the guard at dawn. Where did they make landfall? The new harbor at White Knife. Maester Arion sent word the ship's anchor touched at first light. They should reach Winterfell before dark. Arya crossed to the map, pinned across one wall. Northern coasts thick with annotations, red ink paths tracing where scant ships dared ply the frosted seas. Hardhome lay near the map's frayed edge, a black dot amid white emptiness. She touched it with one calloused finger. "Any losses?" "None, my lady. They say the old Freefolk port is half buried in ice, but the dragonglass veins Brand's scholars predicted are real. They bring samples." "Good," she murmured. Iron washed through her voice like the clang of a distant smithy. "Ready the infirmaries in case. I'll meet them at the gate." Jory withdrew. Arya stared another moment at the painted sea, remembering nights she'd stood on Winterfell's ramparts imagining Bravos, the stepstones, the trembling horizon of her youth. She had chosen different shores, but her children, Lyanna and Eddard, carried her dormant compass in their blood. She brushed wax from her fingertips, pulled a gray wool cloak around her shoulders, and made for the courtyard. Snow still lingered in shadowed bends of road despite the budding grasses of late spring, but wagon wheels thrummed steady along the King's Road that day. Arya felt the tremor of their arrival before she saw them. Footfalls of a column, the squeak of tightened harnesses. She stood between twin gatehouse towers where the direwolf and weirwood banners spilled against a pale sky. Sir Ethan Serwyn, captain of the guard, formed honor ranks along the inner wall, shields glinting. First through the arch rode Arya's son Eddard. He had the lean stark build, a shade taller than his Brienne Mormont, broad cousin, and eyes storm gray around a perpetual thoughtful frown that reminded some of her father, others of Jon. He swung down and clasped her forearm with a warrior's respect before letting formality crack into a grin. "She's in one piece," he said, voice roughened from salt air. "And so's the cargo." Past him came Lyanna Mormont Stark, bare sigil on her fur-trimmed cloak, hair woven in a warrior's braid capped by a shard of obsidian. Her cheeks were wind-burned, her brown skin peeling at the bridge of the nose, but her smile flared bright as the dawn over shivering sea ice. "Mother," she breathed, dropping protocol entirely to wrap Arya in a fierce embrace. Ropes of muscle shifted beneath her mail. "Wait till you see." She beckoned, and 2 pack mules plodded forward, panniers clinking with black crystal lumps edged in blue sheen, raw dragon glass the size of a man's heart. Arya placed her palm against the obsidian facets, cold bit deeper than ordinary stone. Legend said such glass drank the heat of living things. It felt like holding a fragment of night sky. We found veins bigger than barrows, Lyanna said. Some tunnels run deeper than light. Free folk prospectors were already at work when we arrived. Half-starved, no iron tools worth the name. But they knew what they had. And now, Eddard added, we struck a pact. Their clans work the mine under Winterfell's protection. Half the yield is theirs. Half ours. And they send families south each new moon to trade at White Harbor. Lord Wyman's heirs are building storehouses already. Arya scanned both faces. Soul alive, flushing with possibility. She felt again the divide between blade and hearth. Dragonglass once meant little in peaceful decades, but there were whispers on cold wind, of glaciers groaning far north of the wall, of walrus hunters finding strange, pale corpses adrift, skin like blue glass. Her ravens to the citadel returned theories, skepticism, omens. One truth remained. The long night had been shattered before by obsidian tears of the earth. To possess its bounty was to hold the difference between folly and survival, should that darkness ever creep again. Secure it in the old granary for now, she told them. I'll summon the northern lords within the fortnight. We'll decide distribution, trade, and defense. Now. Lyanna's grin crooked wider. I already drafted guard rotations for Hardhome. The Free Folk chiefs elected Frostmoon then as spokeswoman. She wants her warriors trained with ours. Arya laughed, a short, proud bark. Of course you did. They shared the courtyard bustle. Stable hands leading shaggy garrons away. Healers ushering exhausted sailors toward mulled wine. In the midst of clamor, a quiet moment unfolded. Daughter, mother, son, 3 Stark circled by history's long shadow, yet painting new hues upon it. Arya's heart ached with fierce gratitude for choices made, scars earned. That night, Winterfell's great hall simmered with celebration. Boar shoulders roasted above peat fires, their fat hissing into flames. Musicians hammered drums fashioned from driftwood and seal hide, pairing free folk pipe reels with northern lutes. Flagons of dark ale clanked, laughter breached stone like vines. Arya occupied her father's seat. She refused any carved throne, but she descended often to sit among cooks or smiths, sampling broth, trading stories. She found Torhen near a trestle where jars of honeyed lingonberry were being spooned over oatcakes. Age had silvered his beard, but blue eyes shone sharper than ever. Did you catch Lyanna's entrance? He asked. Half the men fell in love when she swung that obsidian axe over her shoulder. She gets that from you, Arya teased. Torhen snorted. Axes maybe, stubbornness, cunning, pure Stark. He clasped her waist, drawing her into a swaying circle as fiddle strings seized a slower tune. Arya allowed herself to be led, though her feet ignored formal steps in favor of instinctive footwork. When the music quickened, she twirled free, cloak flaring. There were cheers. She still danced with lethal grace, even when her weapons were memory alone. Across the hall, Lyanna convened a knot of free folk trappers and manderly stewards. Parchment already unrolled across a bench, sketching shipping schedules. Eddard lingered by the dais speaking with Maester Arion about furnace designs to temper obsidian into arrowheads without shatter. Watching them, Arya felt the sweep of years. Children once shrieking through corridors, now architects of horizons she would never fully know. The revel carried late. At last torches dwindled to coals, servants gathered scraps for swine, and musicians stretched aching fingers. Arya departed through a side passage leading to the godswood, Torhen's comforting palm at her elbow. Moonlight quilted the snowless yard in silver squares. Beyond, red leaf canopies rustled like distant applause. They paused at the pool's edge, breath misting. You're uneasy, Torhen said gently. Only thoughtful. She tapped her knuckles against his breastplate. We lived in peace so long I half forgot the feel of winter on my neck. But obsidian draws omens. The citadel debates. Bran's ravens speak of shifting ice. And I sense we stand at the edge of something vast. Now. Torrin's big hand enveloped hers. If winter returns walking, the north will meet it better armed than before. Because of you. I wonder. She cast a pebble. Rings rippled across the moon's reflection. Every choice closes another door. I closed paths long ago. Bravos, the riverlands, 100 forgotten roads. Will my children feel that iron, or will they shape their own ways as freely as I once wished? Torrin smiled, lines pleating his cheeks. You shaped your road, bent it until it curved back through Winterfell. That was freedom too. Think what you taught them. A sword can be sheathed for a plow. A wolf can guard rather than rend. They'll forge their own legends, and if darkness comes, they know who leads the pack. He drew her close. Her head rested on his chest, hearing the measured drum of his heart. Sound of hearths, not battle horns. She breathed deep pine scent, the cold bite of wind beyond walls, and found peace thick as fur. 3 moons passed. Summer rains swelled the last river. Wheat sprouted knee-tall. Yet restless whispers multiplied. Far western fishermen reported a wrecked galley half encased in sea ice bearing an unfamiliar sigil. A crowned stag quartered with a sunburst. A house the citadel's rolls claimed extinct since Aegon's conquest. The corpses aboard had pale blue irises and wounds that smoked in daylight. Arya convened her council. Lyanna, Eddard, Maester Arion, Lady Daisy Dustin, the tall twins of House Reed. Maps splayed upon the round table beneath spiral iron candelabra. Maester Arion cleared his throat. Our texts describe whites slain by dragonglass, yes, but also by fire. Longclaw's Valyrian steel proved fatal to the Night King himself, according to King Bran's chronicles. If these stagmen are harbingers, we must accelerate production. Now. Eddard nodded. Hardhome's output already exceeds our capacity to smelt. We need forges at White Harbor, at Deepwood Motte. Transports the choke point. Lyanna traced shipping lanes. Open the Wolf's Maw path across the islands. I sailed it. Reefs are treacherous but manageable with lantern buoys. She stabbed a finger. With 3 harbors we cut transit time by half. Arya listened, weighing each proposal. When talk paused, she spoke quiet and firm. The North alone cannot face a second long night, not even with our stores. We need southern hands. We'll send emissaries to King's Landing to Queen Daenerys. Sansa governs there as hand. Pride flickered across her voice. Who better to persuade the dragon throne that winter's shadow rises again? Daisy Dustin scoffed lightly. The southern banners loathe talk of ice demons. They'll call us northern bogiemongers. We won't ask them to believe, Arya said, eyes narrowing. Only to prepare. We'll bring proof. Frozen corpses sealed in enchanted barrow ice, if need be. Then no. Council murmurs settled. She assigned tasks, ended session with the clang of her dagger butt, ceremonial, seldom drawn. Later that day, as she penned dispatches in her solar, Jon Snow arrived without herald. She sensed him before she looked up, as though the air dared not rustle without her noticing the man who was brother, friend, echo of lost seasons. He wore no crown or sigil, only a cloak of rough black wool and the weathered sword ghost fang at his hip. Lines of exile etched deep around his mouth. Arya stood. For a moment they regarded one another. 2 branches of the same storm-bent tree, roots entwined in memory. Then the distance vanished. She crossed the floor and clasped him to her breast. I heard you roamed beyond the sunset sea. She whispered against his shoulder. I had to see how far the world stretched, he murmured. Turns out it's a circle. Every shore leads back to home. He held her a breath longer, then stepped aside, scanning the chamber's scroll towers. I came for more than reunion. You felt it too, she guessed. He nodded. Sails of strange ice-shadowed ships haunt the shivering sea. I saw one off Ibn, crew dead yet walking. The free cities arm powder trade cogs with alchemists' fire. Something stirs in heavy water beyond maps. Arya exhaled slowly. Then fate drags us into familiar wars. Jon half smiled. Perhaps not wars. Perhaps endings. He drew a weather-stained parchment, flattened it on the table. Painted in charcoal shades was a crescent coast wreathed by glaciers. Inland, a mountain like a spearhead pierced the heavens. I found an island beyond lonely light, he said. Its heart is volcanic. Living flame under ice, dragon glass vents. Fire mayors from Ashai say such places are nexus points, where the world's heat breathes out. An army cannot march there, but a small force might hold it. If the dead rise, this island could forge the weapons to break them, endlessly. Arya studied the sketch. Strange reading, you turned explorer. I learned from someone who always chased horizons, Jon said, warmth in his eyes. Care to see one more together? She laughed softly. Gray ships, wind like teeth, wolves on the prow? It tempts me. She sobered. But my oaths lie here. The North is my charge. He inclined his head, accepting. Then lend me fighters. Smiths who work glass into blade. I'll carve a bulwark beyond any they expect. Take Lyanna, she said without pause. Her free folk allies know the ice paths, and there's no commander I trust more. She gazed at the map again. Eddard will remain. The North will need his steady hand. Decision settled in her bones like an old friend. Go see him. He'll wrestle logistics until dawn. Jon placed his hand over hers on the parchment. I've seen kingdoms crumble because hope delayed. But Winterfell endures. Because of you. And now. Arya looked up. In his eyes she glimpsed the boy with a smile too soft for the world. The man who bore crowns unwanted. The exile who walked horizons seeking silence. She squeezed his fingers. Because of all of us, she corrected. Pack. Remember? He nodded, voice husky. Pack. Preparations unfurled like sails. Lyanna gathered 200 volunteers. Stark archers, Bear Island shield maidens, free folk raiders adept on ice flows. Blacksmiths melted hard-home glass into daggers, arrowheads, spear points. Eddard supervised loading of grain, goats. Snowbred ponies. Ravens flew to every northern seat, calling for vigilance. And Arya drafted a letter to Sansa Diol. Ink glided beneath her quill. Little sister. She began. Private code of their youth. Winter stirs. Send dragonfire northwards, not in anger, but in alliance. Come to Winterfell by first frost. Let wolf and dragon plot again the world's tomorrow. She sealed it with gray wax, the direwolf pressed deep. On the eve of departure, Jon and Lyanna's fleet lay moored at White Knife's timber docks, 5 stout cogs, hulls reinforced for ice, figureheads carved into snarling wolves. Snow fell in slow spirals, gentle as ash. People lined the quay waving pine tar torches. Arya rode beside Eddard, Torhin, and Maester Arion to bid farewell. Lyanna strode down the gangplank clad in black bearskin over scale mail. Obsidian axe slung across her back. She looked every inch Mormont matriarch and Stark heir combined. She knelt briefly before Arya, pulling a wolf's head token from her belt. Keep this till I return, she said. Proof the pack remains whole. Arya accepted the token, thumb tracing its whorls. Bring me back a shard of your island peak. Lyanna grinned. A mountain for a token? Bargain struck. They embraced. Warrior to warrior, mother to daughter. As Lyanna boarded, Jon approached. I never thanked you, he said. For what? Letting you steal my best commander. For forging something better than vengeance. You turned pain into hearthlight. It lit roads for more souls than you'll ever know. Arya's eyes shimmered. Then carry that flame west. And return. Now. He smiled. Rare. Unguarded. I always do. Horns boomed. Lines were cast off. Sails caught the newborn wind. The fleet slipped downriver, torches mirrored on water. Arya watched until the stern lights vanished round a bend. Snow pricked her lashes, melted into paths upon her cheeks, indistinguishable from tears. Autumn marched in bronze and scarlet. Ravens replied from King's Landing. Sansa, quill steady. Promised dragons and steel would heed the North's warning. Queen Daenerys herself would fly to Winterfell when snows thickened, older now, but dragonfires still fierce beneath fragile peace. Arya prepared guest halls, dredging memories of a time Daenerys' armies camped beyond the walls, and winter nearly devoured them all. Eddard assumed more duties, holding lordly courts, negotiating grain stores, leading patrols along the eastern marches where snows drifted tallest. He carried himself with steady pragmatism, but Torhin noted fatigue at the edges, watchful nights reading smuggler ledgers by hearthglow. Arya counseled rest. He laughed. Stop sounding like Maester Aerion, mother. I'm the untested blade of this family. The more I swing, the truer my edge. She ruffled his hair, shockingly like Bran's once, and thought of all edges that dulled too soon. One starless night, a horn blast hammered the stillness. Rapid, frantic, Arya sprang from slumber, donned gambeson and cloak, raced to the ramparts. Lanterns bobbed along the eastern parapet where sentries clustered. Snow muffled all but the whistle of wind. Below the wall, dark shapes writhed. 3 horses, riderless, their flanks scored by parallel talon marks crusted in ice. She descended by stair, Sir Ethan on her heels. In the courtyard, stable hands calmed the beasts. Their breaths steamed unnatural blue. Arya touched a wound. Flesh brittle, cold burned deeper than frostbite. She recognized those brands from tales of white claws. In one saddlebag lay a broken raven tube. She fished out the parchment within. Ink blurred by melting sleet, but 2 words remained stark. Deepwood Falls. Dread curled like smoke inside her ribs. Deepwood Motte stood 100 leagues west, fortified by House Glover and home to one of the new forges. If attacked and lost, some force moved faster than any human army over jagged passes. She gathered counsel at once. Maps spread under torchlight. Riders dispatched to muster reserves. Eddard demanded command of the relief host. Arya considered, weighing dangers and necessity. You know the terrain, she said finally. Take 300. Ride hard. She placed her palm on his cheek, the gesture revealing the mother behind the lady. Return, Ned. Your sister has gone west. I can't lose you too. He clasped her wrist. I'll come home. A vow in his eyes older than he was. Before dawn, banners streamed beyond the gate. Gray direwolves, green reeds, white bear paws, hoofbeats swallowed by snow-sheathed silence. Arya stood watching until the column dwindled upon the horizon. Beside her, Torrin offered a flask. She swallowed once, liquid fire chasing cold from her gut. We should call our own banners to Winterfell, he advised. If Ice Walkers or their thralls move, they'll strike again. She nodded, already planning ration shutters, nurse rotations, fallback torch caches. War. Her old, unwanted companion pressed its weight across her shoulders, and she embraced it with grim familiarity. That evening, a lone raven sliced through flurries, feather tips rhymed in white. It bore Joan's cipher. Island holds. Glass forging apace. Scouts sighted dead upon floes, numbers small for now. Holding fast. Lyanna a storm. Ghost stands watch. Send word of Deepwood and Queen's fleet. Fire and snow remain allies. Arya traced the strokes, sensing resolve beneath. She penned swift reply. News of Deepwood. Plea for caution. Love braided through formal lines, then climbed the rookery stairs herself, releasing the raven into whirling black. Around her, Winterfell bristled. Smithies thudded day and night, shaping obsidian arrowheads. Children practiced slingstone volleys. Old men wove firepot wicks from flax. She commandeered the library tower, converting chambers into strategy rooms where reeds and hill clans hammered out signal codes. And at dusk, she walked the battlements alone, listening for echoes of a younger Arya who once whispered names to the wind. The list was gone. In its place she repeated softly, Diana, Eddard, Jon, I, Sansa, Lore, Hearth, Hope, Pack, Wan, Pack, Pack, 7 days passed without raven or rider. On the 8th, a blizzard carried a faint horn cry that shivered through every hall. The returning relief host. Arya raced to the gatehouse, snow pelting her face. Shapes emerged, horses staggering, men stumbling, torches low. Eddard rode at the fore, armor cracked, one arm bound in blood-stiff linen. Gates groaned open. The survivors poured inside, only half those who left. Eyes wide with horror, some wept, others stared vacant. Arya grasped her son's uninjured shoulder. Tell me. He dismounted stiffly. Deep wood raised. We reached the hills, saw smoke and no fire. The dead moved through snow, silent as dusk. They struck at night, numbers beyond count. We burned cairns, but flame only slowed them. His gaze shuddered. They took Lord Glover, tore him before my eyes, and he rose again still screaming. Arya's breath hissed frost. Valyrian blades. They worked, but too few. The forge's store consumed by ice. We salvaged what glass we could. He unstrapped a canvas bundle. Spear points, knives, gifts of Hardhome, now dulled, chipped. Even glass shatters after many blows. Arya turned to Sir Ethan. Sound the horn thrice. All banner lords to Winterfell at once. Torrhen joined them, voice low. The Queen's dragons? Not yet arrived. Weather or court delay. She squared her shoulders. We prepare without them. Winterfell became a hive. Within days, 10,000 souls crowded behind its walls. Karstarks, Manderleys, Crannogmen, who rode elk across drifting marsh. Even Ironborn captains sued for shelter, offering longships for coastal patrols. The Godswood served as triage, kennels as armories, training yards rang day and night. Arya walked among them command to command, her cloak whipping like a banner of living charcoal. Sansa's raven arrived 3 days into the siege preparations. Queen Daenerys escort hampered by storms near Maidenpool. One dragon injured by lightning, forced to land. They marched north but might miss winter's first blow. Arya read the message in torchlight beneath the gate tower, lips mesquing frustration. She dispatched riders with beacons along every southern road, guides for the Queen's host, and doubled sentries on the river to light pyres should dragonfires silhouette the sky. That twilight, a horn bawled once then fell mute, a sound strangled mid-blast. Arya rushed to the parapet. Eastward beneath a bruised horizon, a wall of pale shapes advanced. So vast it seemed the snow walked alive. Pale banners of frost-laced wind swirled above them. Ghostly war horns moaned. Memories of stories Nan told filtered dark as cellar air. They come silent, they come cold. They feast on fear and breathe the long night. Arya yet felt no fear, only clarity carved diamond sharp. She descended to the courtyard where troops assembled, black obsidian glinting on spearheads. She vaulted onto a half-wall, voice ringing. Children of the North, pack of Winterfell. The night seeks to swallow dawn, but we are the dawn's steel. We hold this ground not for walls of stone, but for every hearth-fire beyond these gates, for songs unborn, for tomorrows the dead would silence. Stand with me. Stand as wolves. Then, a howl answered. Low rising, Greywind's descendants in the kennels, free folk hounds, men whose blood knew cold better than sun. It swept the ranks until all throats, human and beast, carved moonlit defiance. Snowstorm winds gusted, the enemy line drew nearer. Eddard joined her, sling of dragonglass javelins across his back. Torrhen strapped a broad obsidian great axe in two-handed grip. Maester Arion lit the first trench fuse. Flames leapt, a ribbon of ember curling into darkness. The battle began. Dead collided with fire. Screeches like ice, fracturing stone. Arrows rained obsidian tips. Each white struck ignited blue fire, then crumbled. But where one fell, two advanced. Spearmen braced. Shield maidens hammered flanks. Children carried pitch to keep cauldrons spewing molten tar. Arya fought atop the outer wall. She had foregone commander vantage for blade in hand. Needles echo, reforged in glass-coated steel. She danced ruthless arcs, water dancer footwork, guiding each thrust through frozen eyes, extracting each tempered slice before shatter. Every white felled felt like plucking a star from doomed sky. Hours bled. Torches guttered. Frost gnawed helms. In a lull, Arya scanned the horizon, searching for distant flame, for dragons. None. Only swirling snow, and at its heart, a tall figure astride a skeletal elk. Crown of ice spears atop bleached hair. A monarch of the forgotten night. He raised a hand. The fallen stirred anew. Obsidian shards protruded still, yet blue light rekindled within hollow sockets. Terror rippled the defenders. Shouts faltered. Arya's stomach clenched. If dragon glass could be undone, their last bastion might fall. She signaled retreat to the inner walls. As men filed back, Arya remained forward-facing, eyes locked on the Ice King. In her hand, dragon glass dagger gleamed black. She envisioned leaps across ramparts, a lone strike to sever command. But distance and undead retinue thwarted impulse. Suddenly, thunder split the firmament. Red gold blaze tore clouds asunder. A dragon's roar cascaded down eternity. Everyone looked up. From Storm's womb emerged Queen Daenerys, astride Drogon. Wings spanned like night curtains aflame. Beside Rhaegal wheeled Aegon Targaryen, Jon Snow, clinging to his spines, cloak snapping. They dived, flames streaming. Dragonfire chewed dead ranks into vapor. Ice King's elk reared, shrieking. He fled behind a shield of swirling frost, but Drogon and Rhaegal harried him, jets intersecting. Snow melted to torrents, steam-blanketed battlefield. Arya signaled charge. Wolves and men surged, momentum reborn. She vaulted into churn, fighting toward the dragon-lit clearing where the Ice King raised a spear of glacial crystal, aimed at Rhaegal's exposed belly. Time decelerated. Shard flew, Jon angled, but too late. Arya sprinted, sprang onto a snowbank, launched needleglass end over end. The dagger struck the spear mid-flight, both shattered in a glittering burst. Fragments razored across her cheek. Rhaegal banked aside, unharmed. Jon saw her, eyes meeting through conflagration, and he dove Drogon lower, unleashing a cone of white-hot fury that engulfed the Ice King. When flames cleared, only a warped circlet of ice remained, melting into mud. The dead stuttered, stilled, and collapsed like robes emptied of men. Silence crashed heavier than any roar. Snowflakes hissed against embers. Survivors stared, as if afraid sound would fracture miracle. Then, Arya exhaled. Pain registered, glass slivers along her cheek. Minor, superficial. She wiped blood, absent-mindedly. Jon landed. He ran to her, leapt over melting corpses. They embraced amid steam. "You never miss," he whispered hoarsely. "Water dancer's courtesy." She replied, voice unsteady with exhausted mirth. Drogon prowled, snorting, while Rhaegal circled overhead. Daenerys dismounted. Silver hair plastered damp. She approached Arya, eyes alight. "Lady Stark," the queen greeted. "Winter's heart sought your gates. It broke upon them." Arya bowed her head slightly. "With your fire?" "With your hearth," Daenerys countered. She swept gaze across walls, where northerners cheered, raising dragonglass-studded pikes. "We have work still, to mend kingdoms, bury the dead, hunt remnants. But tonight, dawn wins." "Then no." Arya looked to Jon, to Sansa arriving on horseback behind Queen's retinue, to Eddard limping but alive, arm around Torrhen's shoulders. She felt threads of countless choices braid into a tapestry more resilient than steel, one she had woven through ledgers and swords, mercy and resolve. Inside her, the girl who once chased cats finally laid down to rest. Weeks later, sunlight poured warm upon repaired ramparts. Spring seeded crocus among melted gore. Funerals burned nightly. From pyres rose ash that fertilized tomorrow. In the godswood, Arya knelt before the heart tree. She set needle, old blade reforged in glass, upon moss roots, and beside it the wolf token Lyanna had given. Here. She whispered to the red leaves trembling overhead. I leave the weapon I was, and the memory of who I've become. Guard them. She stood, lighter. As she left, children's laughter rippled from the yard. Her grandchildren, perhaps, or orphans given new homes. The sound threaded with hammer clang, with pages turning in an open-air library Eddard built beside the hot springs. Life, indomitable. Arya crossed a stone bridge to the east gate where a small ship's mast poked above crenellations. Lyanna's fleet had returned laden with volcano-forged blades and scrolls of unknown lore. Beside the dock, Jon conversed with free folk captains, hair streaked silver yet bearing the posture of men who found both burden and release. Lyanna spotted Arya, waved a gauntlet. She wore a circlet of carved dragon glass instead of steel, symbol of stewardship over the island forge. Eddard approached from stables carrying a crate of saplings, heart tree cuttings destined for outlying castles. Torrhen supervised masons installing fire channel piping along the outer walls. Arya paused, inhaled. The horizon dazzled bright. Ravens glided lazily. Tomorrow would hold councils, letters, perhaps another voyage across uncharted seas. But today, Winterfell rang with the everyday miracle of survival. She descended the staircase, boots clicking. The pack awaited. K.N.D. Gray dawn touched the towers of Winterfell with a pearl dust glow, softening stone and soot alike. But within the keep, the waking hum was already thick with purpose. Arya Stark stood atop the battlements in boots, still stained by the last battle's ash, palms wrapped around a clay cup of small folk cider, eyes following new banners as they unfurled along the ring wall. A deerwolf stitched of silver thread rippled beside the three-headed dragon of Queen Daenerys, and below them a crescent spear point, the sigil Lyanna had chosen for the forge isle far out beyond the sunset sea. 3 emblems, 1 cause, flapping together in the same spring wind. It felt to Arya like the first true pledge of unity she had ever seen in her long, tanglesome life. Yet peace, as she had learned, was never weightless. In the yard below, the Queen's unsullied drilled shoulder to shoulder with Karstark pikemen. Sandaled feet and leather boots struck cadence on flagstones, while Grey Worm barked brisk commands. At the stables, free folk herders tried coaxing shaggy elk into pens, meant for sleek northern rounceys, the animals snorting at unfamiliar scents. Near the stew sheds, Sansa's capital bakers supervised the mixing of barley loaves fortified with dragon pepper, arguing amiably with Glover quartermasters about spice ratios that would satisfy both northern souls and southern palates. Everywhere tasks collided and overlapped. Orders, translations, compromises. One war ended, another mosaic began. Arya drank the last of her cider, savoring its faint bitterness, then descended the winding stair just as the morning council bell tolled. The great hall was still draped in hunting greens and funeral whites, a strange marriage of celebration and loss. Long tables bore rolled charts, slate boards marked with grain tallies and troop schedules. She claimed her accustomed place on the low dais opposite the hearth, refusing again the high-backed chair that guests insisted be called a throne. Beside her, Jon Snow drew off his travel cloak and shook out residual frost. Daenerys, quiet-eyed but unbowed, settled on a cushioned bench. Sansa entered next in dove-gray silk trimmed with direwolf fur, scrolls tucked under one arm. They greeted one another not with ceremony, but with the weary familiarity of kin, who had survived the impossible twice. "I'll speak quickly," Sansa began unrolling a leather cylinder that snapped flat to reveal 6 painted discs. Gold, silver, and iron, arranged in a wheel. King's Landing has approved the Northern Reconstruction Accord. 70,000 gold dragons allocated for rebuilding Deepwood and the western forges. Half arrives by sea within the fortnight. Grey Worm rested a gauntleted hand upon the table's edge, expression inscrutable as a marble sentinel. Unsullied escort will meet the convoy at Maiden's Fall. Any raiders will taste spears. And the High Lords? Arya asked, grumbling. Sansa allowed, but the Crown's decree stands. Lord Merryweather protests spending southern coin on snowbound holds, yet Sir Davos reminded him those holds now smelt the dragonglass that may spare Old Town if whites return. Davos' plain words carry weight. Daenerys drank from a small earthen cup. The wheel turns best when every spoke bears pressure. Let them argue. They still pull. Done? Jon scanned the gathered faces. Maester Arion, Lady Daisy Dustin, Lyanna's proxy Frostmoon then. Newly arrived from the Isle, Lord Wyman Manderless, plump grandson Dustin belted, into a coat too grand for his years. Then, let's turn to the Forge Isle, Jon said. He pointed to a parchment map, dotted with charcoal islands west of the Iron Islands. Lyanna reports the volcano's second vent is ready for crucibles, but they're short of experienced tonsmiths. We can spare 6 from White Harbor and 3 Kuhorik, who reached us last moon. They require tempered shelter, or the sulfurous vapor will rot their lungs. Then, sail them out with the next grain barge, Arya decided. I'll send my physician Idara to oversee Medicae. She's brewed a resin salve of winter mint that counters lung scald. And water? Frostmoon asked, leaning forward. The small mountain springs run copper heavy. My folk boil it, yet tongues taste blood. We'll pipe rainwater from canvas berms, Arya said. Eddard has designs. He reports from the West Road midday. We'll finalize then. She paused. Any word of fresh dead at the rim glaciers? Frostmoon shook her head. None these past 2 fortnights. Phantom fires hiss beyond the bergs, but no shamblers cross the flows. Her jaw set. We still patrol. Quiet fell, threaded by the pop of hearth logs. After a moment, Arya gripped the table's edge, as though anchoring the next thought. We've beaten their host and shattered their king, she said, voice low yet unmistakable. But darkness has long memory. We will not grow soft again. No one contradicted her. Quills scratched as orders were penned. Stewards hurried off. When council adjourned, Arya lingered at the maps. Jon rounded the table, hand resting on Ghostfang's worn pommel. Storm tonight, he noted, nodding to the sky beyond high arrow slits. Worst since the wall collapsed, the maester says. Arya traced the painted coastline of Deepwood, Red X where whites had burned, blue circles marking new trenches. We've faced storms before. He smiled, tired warm. Aye. Yet sometimes I wish you'd allow yourself to breathe. She lifted brow. And have you ever? They shared a faint, rueful grin. Then Jon's expression shifted. There is talk, Arya. Lords mutter that the crown owes you more than banners and coin. They whisper, Lady of Winterfell, should rise to queen in the north at last, now that the white frost threat lingers. Dendo. Arya blew out a breath. Sansa wears that crown more gracefully than I. And the north stands stronger joined. Wolf, dragon, bear, spear. I'd not tear seams we just stitched. We know that, Jon said. But some remember Robb's brief reign and hunger for a Stark sovereign. If they insist, remind them I wield no scepter. My justice comes by ledger or steel, whichever hunger demands. The rest is vanity. She fixed him with mischievous eyes. Besides, you would hate the ceremony. They'd dress you in silver brocade again. Jon grimaced theatrically. 7, save us. They parted with soft laughter and unspoken understanding. Pack above tokens. The storm announced itself midday with a growl along the horizon. Clouds black as slag piled like mountains. swallowing light until Winterfell lay beneath a vault of hammered iron. Eddard returned from the west road at gallop, cloak plastered to armor, rain turning dust to mud in moments. His wolfhound Thistle dashed at his stirrup, barking joyfully though lightning spiked the sky. Arya met him under the arched stable loft. "Any trouble?" He swung down, water streaming from helm crest. "Bandit gnats along the bear path. Nothing we couldn't swat. Grain cart safe." He nodded at the heavens. "Though we nearly drowned the flower en route." Arya clapped his shoulder. Warm broth inside, then blueprints. Inside the keep, torches flickered in sudden drafts. Stone corridors groaned, leaded window panes rattled. The brewing gale felt alive, pressing ancient cold against the newly patched walls. In the great hall, servants scurried, bracing shutters with extra bars. As Arya and Eddard pored over rainwater piping schematics, a deafening crack split the air. The keep shuddered. Dust rained from rafters. Arya's instinct flared. She dashed to the nearest arrow slit. Outside, a carrack under manderly colors moored on the river spewed embers. Lightning had transfixed its main mast, igniting pitch-sealed seams. Flames whipped sideways in the wind. Arya bolted, Eddard at her heels, sprinting through archways toward the riverside postern. Rain stabbed like needles. By the quay, sailors shouted and bucket chains formed. But the blaze raced faster. Worse, cargo netting snapped. Barrels of lamp oil rolled across deck amid sparks. "Cut her loose," Arya screamed. "Push her mid-current." But ropes entangled, burned, tightened to glowing lines. Eddard vaulted the gangplank, cleaving hawsers with his sword. Arya grabbed a pike and levered barrels toward the rail. The first thunked overboard, hissed on impact. Yet another split open. Oil sprayed across pitch and sailcloth. A fireball roared skyward, tossing them backwards. Arya crashed hard, ears ringing. Through smoke, she glimpsed figures on the riverbank, two shadows in slick hoods, movements wrong, jerky. One hurled a clay sphere. It shattered near the rudder, belching green blaze, wildfire. Saboteurs. Rising, Arya flung her pike, skewering the nearer hood to a mooring post. The second sprinted for the reeds, inhumanly fast. Eddard gave chase, but the creature leapt the wet slope and vanished into swirling rain. Arya hauled herself upright, lungs searing, and plowed back toward the gangplank as sailors finally heaved the cargo ship free, smoke trailing like an accusing flag down the torrent. Hours later, when fires were quenched and casualties tallied, 3 sailors dead, 5 burned, Maester Arya unmasked the pike-struck saboteur. Its flesh was mottled gray, lenses of ice over shriveled eyes. A white, yet no ordinary thrall. Its fingers ended in sharpened, blackened bone, tips dipped in some resin that resisted flame. This corpse had not wandered, it had planned. Jon arrived drenched, cloak torn by wind. He stared at the body, jaw tight. I saw such things beyond Leng. Whites bred for sabotage, driven by will not their own. The Dark Nose knew tricks. Daenerys joined, Drogon screeching restively from the courtyard where dragon handlers soothed him. Rain steamed on his scales. "Their king is gone," she said, voice frosted with disbelief. "Who guides them now?" Arya met her gaze. Maybe the Night King was only one mind among many, or something older stirs behind the frost. She ran fingers over resin claws, felt gritty shards like volcanic sand. "And I think it sees our forge isle as threat. Ships bear our lifeline of glass. They aim to burn the river fleet." Jon exhaled. "Then we shift routes, overland caravans through the frozen shore. More labor, less risk of fire." Eddard, returning breathless, shook his head. "The pass's ice choke beyond Hornwood. Wagons would stall." "We'll fly," Daenerys decided. "Dragons ferry the first loads. Unsullied guard the rest along coast by night." The council dispersed into storm-racked corridors, issuing orders. Arya lingered by the dead saboteur. Its face, twisted in death again, glistened under torch-fat droplets. She recognized the thin, feminine jawline. A memory flickered. A barmaid from White Knife's quay. laughing while pouring blackberry ale. Recruited, stolen, repurposed into walking bomb. Arya swallowed bile. The enemy no longer merely raised its own corpses, it harvested the living. She strode away, heart staccato. The gale raged 3 days. When sky cleared, wreckage littered the banks. But dragons had flown, carrying sealed crates of dragon glass to the forge aisle. Reports returned swift. Lyanna Smith's already splitting crystals into flexible layers for arrow fletchings. Innovation of a Kuhoric master who believed slivers embedded in flight shafts would explode across ranks of whites like shrapnel. Despite progress, Arya sensed pressure mounting, a vice tightening on every success. Nightly she dreamed of thin-boned whites scaling tower walls, of wildfire bursting beneath her children's feet. She grew leaner, eyes shot with red threads. Torrin noticed, chiding gently, but she brushed concern aside. One dusk Eddard requested audience in the Godswood. She found him by the heart tree, its red leaves rustling as though in hush. He knelt, head bowed. Blood from a shallow cut marked his temple. "What happened?" Arya asked, crouching. "Training mishap," he said, though shame flickered. "Not why I called you." He produced a folded parchment smelling faintly of damp pouch leaf. Scouts captured 2 live whites near the burnt forest. When the ward weavers attached runes, the things shrieked in a tongue no maester knows. I recognized a fragment. Old Roynar." Arya frowned. "How?" He hesitated. "Aunt Sansa's libraries hold fragments I studied." The white syllables matched. Roughly, blood lights the trackless river south. That river could be the Blackwater, the Trident, any major course. Or the Mander, Eddard added, brow creased. King's Landing lies there. If whites planned sabotage in the capital, if wildfire stores ignite beneath Aegon's hill, thousands burn. Arya whispered, dread blossoming. Could be misdirection, but we must warn them. And so ravens flew south carrying cryptic caution. Arya pressed her sigil in midnight wax, praying they arrived before whatever shadow plotted. Weeks passed. Grain fields sprouted near Deepwood. Black glass arrowheads filled chests, yet nerves hammered taut. Frostmoon then's ravens carried dire tidings. Enormous bergs calving from northern ice shelves, drifting toward shipping lanes like silent fortresses. Mariners called them graveyards, for they carried skeleton forests frozen in stance. Men, beasts, once living walls entombed in blue crystal. So far they drifted aimless, but fear traveled faster than any hull. Merchants refused charters. Southern trade slowed. In the Queen's war room one evening, Daenerys, Jon, Arya, and Sansa bent over a hardwood table carved generations prior by stark woodsmen. Candlelight painted their faces with golden edge. "We must investigate these ice islands," Daenerys insisted. "If they carry an army dormant, we burn them before the thaw." Arya inhaled. Her heart tugged between fortress duties and old fire yearning for horizon. "I'll go," she said. "Winterfell holds. Eddard, Torrin, and Sansa keep counsel." The pack splits its teeth. Jon objected first, then Sansa, but Arya's resolve hardened. She had not sailed beyond coastal lines in decades. The thought of cold sea spray sliding across her cheeks electrified dormant wires. Moreover, no one knew those waters like the girl she once was, who memorized smuggler routes while blindfolded, who danced across ship rigging under Brevosi moons. She could read tides like ledger columns. Preparations whirled. Within 3 days, Arya boarded the Windspite, a sleek black-hulled sloop captained by Syrio Storm, a one-eyed Brevosi whose accent tugged memories of water dance lessons. Ghost accompanied, Jon insisted, and Frostmoon brought a half-score then warriors. Drogon would shadow high overhead, Daenerys astride, though to spare supplies they parted after the first leg, rendezvousing at coordinates etched in obsidian chip. Night of departure, Winterfell gathered at the river to see them off. Torches mirrored on rippled water. Eddard hugged Arya fierce enough to bruise. "Bring back charts," he teased, voice thick. She kissed his brow just above the healing scar. "And a tale to outdo your battlefield stories." Torrin folded her into mountain arms. "Blad's dull," he murmured. "But a hearth awaits red-hot always." She rested forehead against his. "I follow thread home." Sansa pressed a package into her hand, parchment bound with blue ribbon. "For reading when fear grows," was all she said. Wind caught the sails, docklines fell. The wind spite slid into the moonlit artery of the white knife, crew singing in low sea-rough voices. Arya curled fingers around the rail, watching Winterfell shrink to a lantern constellation. For a heartbeat she felt again the child who once yearned to outrun every shore. Yet this voyage bore no childish flight. It was duty wearing wanderlust's mask. Days blended into rolling gray seas. The sloop sliced currents like a shark fin, canvas taut with stiff northern wind. Frostmoon's warriors practiced spear throws on deck between tasks, their tattoos dancing under rising sun. Sirio storm navigated by starlight and gull cry. Arya stalked rigging at dawn, limbs reacquainting with salt air acrobatics. Ghost a white blur at her heels. Nights she unwrapped Sansa's parcel. A stack of hand-pressed pages, the first chapters of a book Sansa wrote secretly, chronicling their house tragedies and triumphs through a lens of healing rather than hatred. Reading Sansa's measured prose under oil lantern glow filled Arya with quiet awe and sadness for seasons lost. On the 9th day, a whitening fog swallowed horizon. The crow's nest cried out, "Berg ahead." Arya climbed shrouds to join. Through swirling mist, a leviathan of ice emerged, fleetingly lit by hazed sun. It sprawled 5 ship lengths, its ridges serrated like dragon backplates. Embedded within translucent blue walls were countless shapes, limbs, antlers, broken carts, serpentine lengths of chain. A frozen battlefield. Wind spite hove to, 50 paces distant. Small skiff lowered. Arya, Frostmoon, and 4 sailors rowed across. As they neared, odor of ancient brine mingled with something antiseptic, unnatural. Frostmoon ran a mittened hand along the ice, scraping coils of frost to reveal a face. A boy perhaps 14, lips parted, eyes like milky marbles. "Dead scarcely a moon," Frostmoon muttered. "Berg birthed from seafloor shelf, not high glacier." Arya spotted fissures running deep, curvilinear, almost carved. She peered through. There, clustered at the berg's core, were globes the size of horse skulls, each swirling with pale smoke, eggs or cysts. Her breath caught. They pulsed faintly as though attuned to some remote heartbeat. She scaled a ledge, dagger scraping footholds, and wedged steel point between egg and ice. The glassy shell rattled. Frostmoon shouted caution, but Arya pried. The sphere popped free, tumbling onto snow. It cracked, spilling dusky vapor dart. Instantly, the young corpse's eyes flared cobalt inside the wall. Fingers twitched. Arya flung dragon steel across the cyst. A spark. The fluid ignited, hissing turquoise flame. The corpse stilled. Frostmoon gaped. Fire within the egg quickens them. Saboteur pods. Quickly, Arya signaled the ship. "Fetch pitch, axes, wildfire vials." "We melt the nest now." For hours they worked, searing globes until Berg fissured and calved. At dusk, Drogon loomed overhead, Daenerys' silhouette tiny but resolute. Dragonfire dived, bathing the Berg. Ice cascaded into hissing bay. When last ember fell, nothing remained but blackened slush adrift. Returning to Windspite, Arya collapsed on coil of rope, lungs raw. Daenerys landed by rope ladder, face streaked with soot. "They breed them in darkness," the queen whispered. Eyes wide. "Hatcheries under sea." Arya nodded grim. "And they send Berg south like plague ships." She clutched rail. "We must chart currents. Hunt everyone." Next dawn they set course, along prevailing flows, Drogon scouting from cloud canyons. Frostmoon's warriors kept watch for abnormal ice. Illuet. Twice more they found bergs seeded with cysts. Twice more dragonfire erased them. But on the 15th day, Syrio storm spied sails on distant northeast quadrant. 3 brigantines, tattered, drifting. Arya ordered approach. As they closed, moans drifted. Human pain, not undead. The ships bore sigils of House Harlaw, yet decks were blood-slick. Boarding revealed survivors locked below. Ironborn raiders, eyes crazed, tongues blackened. They spoke of a glass sea demon that rose, spraying shards that turned crew into whites within breaths. The demon then vanished beneath waves, leaving berg seeds afloat. One captive, a youth named Weddy, clutched a broken conch shell etched with spiral glyphs. The demon wore this crest, he babbled. Its voice like whale cry, but words old as salt. Arya recognized similar glyphs, scorched into cysts. Back aboard Windspite, Daenerys traced the glyph with gloved finger. Could there be an intelligence submerged, directing seeds, raising sabotage thralls? Jon, listening via Raven link from the Forge Isle, replied, "Old tales speak of the drowned ice priestess, leviathans of frozen fire. Myths." Yet his letter ended, "Myth forged our doom once. Hunt truth." Arya resolved to dive for clues. They sailed where Weddy described the demon's strike, an area above the abyssal chasm called Narwhal's Grave. Drogon circled high, currents sucked like beasts beneath. Syrio anchored leeward. Arya donned sealskin, diving gear, fashioned by free folk. Flexible, greased against freeze, tethered to deck by woven copper line. Frostmoon and a sailor named Hob followed. Over rail they slipped. Icy water knifed lungs, but suits held. Light filtered turquoise. They descended past glimmering schools of ghost herring into gloom. Lantern globes strapped to belts revealed towering pillars of basalt rising from trench mouth. Upon those pillars, carving grooves, same spiral glyph repeated, glowing faintly with phosphorescent algae. Currents pulsed with faint hum, like heartbeat. At 60 fathoms, the trench yawned black. From its rim rose vents, exhaling shimmering jets of warm brine. In that shimmer drifted translucent orbs, protocysts, ascending serenely toward colder layers to congeal. The demon was no creature, but a process. The earth itself, forging weapons for the dark, guided by carved runes harnessing volcanic flux. Arya signaled tug. Group surfaced swift. On deck she panted, mind spinning. The world's bed cracks, they farm the vents. Daenerys' brow furrowed. Can we collapse them? Perhaps, Arya said, adrenaline icy. We redirect vents into implosion. But we need explosives. Wildfire, dragonfire. Smelted iron weights. She paced. Syrio, plot coordinates. We return to Winterfell for supplies, then strike the vents at dawn tide. Syrio bowed. As the dancing master commands. The voyage home pushed hull and crew. Gales thrashed. Unseen shapes shadowed wake at night. Ice fragments trailing like predators. Yet after 8 relentless days, Winterfell's river lighthouse winked welcome. Arya's heart eased at first glimpse of towers. Dockhands hailed. Eddard rushed to greet her, but expression grave. The capital, he breathed. Ravens from King's Landing, wildfire vault at Dragon Pit detonated. 100 dead, but they contained it. Saboteurs left the same resin claws. Arya's fists clenched. We found their source. We must act before next tide births another plague. Within an hour, plan crystallized. 3 dragon glass mines hollowed into hollow point plugs, packed with wildfire, bound in lead casings to sink. Drogon and Rhaegal would drop them into vents. Windspite would deploy decoy cyst nets to draw rising pods away during descent. Sansa oversaw production halls. Jon flew east to escort Rhaegal. Frostmoon prepared then divers to cut anchor cables at depth. Night before departure, Arya visited the Godswood. She knelt by Needle's resting place, laid a hand on moss. "Guide my strike," she murmured. Memory of her father's voice drifted. "When the cold comes, you will know your heart by its heat." She opened Sansa's draft again, reading a new mailed chapter. Sansa had penned Arya's latest deeds, painting her not as a wild blade, but as hearthkeeper of nations. Tears blurred script. She closed the pages, pressed them over her heart. At dawn, wolves howled as Windspite and her sister ship Northgale slipped away. Dragons shadowed them like mountain storms with wings. Sky blazed pastel behind, waves black ahead. 2 days later, they reached Narwhal's grave. Weather eerily still. Sulfur steam curled at waterline. Sailors murmured prayers. Drogon and Rhaegal banked low, clutching heavy bomb plugs in iron harnesses, their riders steeling nerves. Arya took position on forward spar, wind tangling her hair. She lifted a horn. The call echoed. Divers slashed mooring knots. Decoy nets splashed, unrolling webs of charred whalebone and bells. Pods rose from abyss, attracted by vibration. Ghost jelly cysts, drifting pale. Now, Arya hissed through teeth. Dragons dove. Harness releases clanged. Bombs fell, disappearing into green gloom. Heartbeats hammered. Then, deep below, silent flashes, sea convulsed. A thunderous belch of steam burst, geysering spray skyward. Another flash, louder. Then the trench mouth collapsed inward, basalt spires crumbling. A shockwave hurled ships. Masts groaned. Arya clung to rope as ocean heaved. When turmoil stilled, vents were gone. Only foaming whirlpool where fissure sealed. Cysts bobbing near surface shriveled, lifeless. Drogon trumpeted triumph. But the sea rebelled once more. A column of black water erupted farther out, tall as keep towers. Within it, silhouette of serpentine mass writhed, a leviathan of ice-scale armor, eyes burning azure. The demon, awakened, angered. It roared, sound vibrating bones. Tail lashed, birthing wave that slammed Northgale broadside. Crew screamed. Arya's blood surged with savage steadiness. Archers, he roared. Glass-tipped bolts flew, peppering the beast's hide but glanced off thick scales. Drogon swooped. Flames poured. Steam exploded, but creature endured, shrieking. Then Arya glimpsed weak points. Spiral glyph scars along its neck seams where cysts once formed. She seized a ballista bolt, tipped with dragonglass shard. Tied a wildfire flask to its shaft. With Frostmoon's help, she cranked windlass, aligning sights as mast pitched. Windspite creaked. Leviathan advanced, maw yawning icy fog. Hold, Arya muttered, waiting until glowing throat lines aligned. Now. The bolt fired. Time slowed. Shaft arrowing under Drogon's flaming arc, plunging into glyph groove. Glass cracked. Wildfire burst, igniting internal gas. The beast convulsed. Blue fire spilled from mouth. Dragons withdrew. Another geyser of steam blasted as Leviathan's own furnace treacherously detonated inside. It writhed, snapping fins, then sank in swirl of molten ice and boiling water. Silence. Then cheer rose ragged and wild. Arya sagged to knees, breath ragged. Drogon circled once more, then settled on reef rock, like exhausted gargoyle. They lingered to ensure trench remained sealed, collecting cyst fragments for study. Windspite's hull had weathered, though Northgale lost 2 sailors. They stitched wounds, burned remains. On deck that night, Arya leaned against rail where sea shimmered calm, gazing at stars so bright, they hurt. Daenerys joined silently, cloak fluttering. You shot as if arrows were words long kept, the queen said. Arya chuckled tiredly. Perhaps killing monsters is how I speak my truest tongue. Daenerys considered. You could return to such seas. Hunt echoes of dark, until none remain. I could, Arya agreed, softer. She pictured Winterfell. Eddard debating budgets. Torhin teaching orphans axe stance. Sansa writing chapter on New Victory. Lyanna forging on Volcanic Isle. But the pack is more than fang and chase. It is den, hearth, the stories told after the hunt. I will sail again, yet always turn homeward. Daenerys smiled, lines around her eyes softening. Then let the world be grateful. You choose both boots and roots. Upon their return weeks later, spring-laden trees blushed pink along Winterfell's rebuilt orchard. Children chased each other around trunk blossoms, shouting news of dragon sightings. Bells rang from turret to announce victory. Folk poured into yards cheering until voices cracked. Arya stepped onto the quay where banners thrummed, Ghost trotting ahead. Tail-plumed sea. Eddard, Torrin, Sansa, and Jon awaited. Lyanna, newly docked from the forge aisle, shoved through throng to hug her mother fierce. You brought half the ocean, smelling of brimstone, she teased, teary-eyed. Arya laughed, hair salt snarled. And a story too. Shame any bards. That evening, a feast spilled from hall to courtyard. Barrels of white ale cracked, bison haunch roasted, free folk throat song mingled with Dornish lutes. Arya sat near the fire, legs stretched, swapping tales with sailors. She caught Eddard's gaze across flames. He lifted a tankard in salute. Torrin's fingers found hers, squeezing steady. Later, after moonrise, she returned to the godswood alone, candle-lantern in hand. She paused before the moss mound where Needle rested. She touched the hilt, warmth of earth seeping through hilt metal. Softly, almost playfully, she spoke. "Still sharp, little sister." Then she laid a shard of Leviathan scale beside the blade, a reminder that some foes required unorthodox steel. Footsteps approached. Jon, cloak swishing. He joined her wordless, staring at scale. "World keeps secrets." Arya nodded. "But secrets bleed too." They lingered, night breeze stirring red leaves. Jon finally said, "A conclave of maesters convenes soon to revise histories of the Long Night's second rising. They want us there." Arya smiled wryly. "To speak polite before scholars whole Tamar chaos into neat script." "Someone must," he said. "Otherwise songs forget quiet heroes who counted grain or patched walls." Arya wrapped arms around him, resting forehead to his shoulder. "Then we shall tell them everything, even the parts that taste of ash." When they parted, dawn smeared lavender across sky. Bells tolled for morning council, ever unrelenting. Arya inhaled crisp scent of bud sage and new-sown barley. Duty called, but so did the small joys. Warm bread, children's sparring matches, Sansa's next chapter. She strode toward the keep, heart light, the wolf sigil on her jerkin catching the first gold rays. In her wake, godswood leaves rustled. A sound like applause, or perhaps like goodbye to the restless ghost who once dreamed of being soared alone. The woman she had become carried both blade and hearth, voyage and vigilance, and the story she wrote with each step promised that even when ice woke hungry again, the flames born of wolves and dragons would rise to meet it, unbowed, unbroken, incandescent in the dawn that always follows night. Jash. Dawn approached on velvet feet, its first glint still caught behind the eastern pines when Maester Aryon's raven nipped Arya from half-slumber. She sat up on the settle in her solar, hair tousled, leather ledgers still open across her knees. Wind whispered through the shutters, bringing the coppery scent of spent torches and bud-moist soil. She blinked twice, brushed parchment crumbs from her palms, and read the scrap tied to the bird's leg. Urgent, White Harbor. Ward Pollard strange. Lord Dustin dispute. Ships missing 2 nights. She sighed, a small, companionable sound more resignation than alarm, then swung her legs to the floor. Tallow candles guttered low. Coals on the brazier glowed soft as old rubies. She threw on a jerkin, belted a short glass-edged knife, and padded out. 2 corridors away, Asha Greyjoy, now warden of the northern coast, leaned with casual menace against a pillar's niche, arms folded. "You got the same raven?" Arya asked. Asha's half-smile gleamed in torch-bleak dark. "I smell trouble before feathers reach the rookery. Manderley's watchtowers stand, yet 3 fishing cogs vanish like stones in mist. Hard to do without screams. We ride at midday." Arya tightened forearm wraps. "Bring charts, and the river wardens." Asha nodded, and melted back into gloom, iron rivets glinting as she went. By the time the pale sun fingered Winterfell's tallest turret, 6 riders assembled at the east gate, Asha with 2 ironborn scouts. Lily Serwyn, slight and sharp-tongued, but peerless at river navigation. Maester Arya astride a temperamental dun mare. Jory Umber, who carried a hammer broad as his grin, and Arya herself, cloaked in stormgrey felt. They left the keep at a brisk trot, hooves drumming frosted turf, Ghost loping ahead, tail-plumed white thunder. 30 leagues south, White Harbor stirred under gull cry and tar fumes. Warships ringed the outer roads like slate-black chess pieces, their prows scarred by recent skirmish. As Arya's party rode past the sea gate, Harbormaster Wyman III waddled forward, parchment flapping. 3 vessels, my lady, he rasped, breath puffing in cold. The Little Diver, Saint's Thorn, and the Lent Glover barge. All sailed 2 nights past to haul herring. None returned. South wind abruptly died. No storm. Arya's gaze swept the docks. Fisher boats bobbing, nets drying on poles, but tension cinched every rope line. She turned to Lily Serwyn. Tide charts. Lily knelt, chalked quick runic figures on a plank. Last Niep tide 4 days ago. Ebb unusually sluggish. If something blocked channel mouths, wreckage reef, current would slacken. Asha pointed to 2 skinny lads huddling near a bale of cod. Question them, she suggested. They proved deckhands from the Little Diver, spared the voyage after drunken misbehavior. Between guilty stammers they recounted a rumor. Lights under the water, turquoise and gold, flickering beyond the bar at high moon. Asha and Arya exchanged a look. Memory of cysts glowing in trench caverns pricked them both. Sound the outer bells, Arya ordered Wyman. Close harbor until we sweep the coast. Any ship already out stays out until horn signal. Wyman gulped, quill shaking, but obeyed. Bells tolled, a deep, tolling pulse that rippled across warehouses, scattering gulls skyward like thrown snow. By dusk, the frigate Bold Wind weighed anchor with Asha at the helm. Arya stood on bowsprit, hair whipping, Ghost crouched at her side. They cut seaward beneath a sky, the color of hammered pewter. Lanterns hooded in blue silk hung along starboard to mask glare. Lily Serwyn consulted lodestones. Jory kept hand on hammer haft. Midnight's hush drew tight when Lily hissed, current slants weird. She leaned over, trailing a lead-weighted cord. Water colder than surface by 10 degrees. Dead chill. Jory muttered. Remembered Deepwood wells before attack. Arya unhooded 1 lantern. The beam speared blackness for 30 yards, catching nothing but ghost-slick swells. She signaled oars shipped. Oarlocks fell silent. Only heartbeats and the distant bark of seals. Then, faint, thrum whisper thrum, like whale song but faster, mechanical. Deckboards trembled. Ghost snarled, hackles bristling. Asha gestured crew to ready grappling hooks. Out of the dark, a shape drifted. Long, needle-thin, its surface matte obsidian mottled with blue motes. It resembled a hollow log 3 men long, yet moved with predatory aim. At its prow, a lamp of eerie phosphor pulsed. Tie knots of the trench vents, Arya breathed. Smaller scout craft. The thing brushed hull timbers. Tar bubbled where it touched, freezing, cracking into black ice. Asha cursed. Blight. Arya unslung her glass-tipped javelin. She waited for the scout to hover at waterline, then flung. The spear punched through membrane with a wet pop. Blue light flickered out. The craft writhed, revealing itself not metal but flesh. Some larval leviathan fused with machinery. Arion gaped as it thrashed, exuding oily smoke, and sank. But its death triggered rumbling beneath. The sea ahead upwelled, bulging into a ring. Water parted, revealing a funnel descending into abyss, churning like a millstone. From that whirl rose the Little Diver's mast, splintered. Bodies of her crew bobbed, faces slack, eyes glassy and, thank the gods, gray, not blue. They hadn't been converted. They'd been leached of heat. What witchery steals warmth without raising the dead? Jory whispered. Arya's gut churned. Something new, learning restraint, or preparing a harvest. A wave bucked. A second scout craft rammed the stern, cracking planks. Mariners hurled axes. Jory swung his hammer, shattering the thing. Yet more luminous darts zipped beneath the surface, drawing closer like fireflies. Asha snapped. "They're hurting us." She hauled the wheel starboard, but a translucent film rose to block, the sea itself glazing into instant ice. The bold wind ground to halt, keel groaning as rigging snapped. Arya pivoted. "Abandon ship to the port longboat. Light grenades, drop along starboard to delay." Sailors scrambled, tossing clay spheres of wildfire. Emerald flares gouged trenches in frost. Arya slung rope round Ghost and shoved him down the ladder. She followed, boots hitting frigid spray. 20 souls packed the longboat. Asha hacked the painter free. Oars bit slush. All watched as the bold wind froze solid, rigging encased in crystal. Then the deck erupted. Shards of splintery ice shot skyward, and a figure rose from hold. Statuesque, genderless, its body a lattice of hoarfrost and basalt veins glowing cobalt. Where face might be, only a blank mirror of black glass. The ice shepherd, Arya croaked, the name surfacing from dusty Valyrian footnotes. Legend of a being that ferried souls to the long night's cradle, forging armies of disciplined fear. The shepherd raised an arm. The frozen ship groaned, timbers liquefying into spines of clear obsidian that curved toward the longboat, like many jointed talons. Arya seized the tiller, shouting, "Row! Give me line of sight!" Crew dug oars. She snatched a dragon glass arrow, knocked it to Serwyn's compact recurve, inhaled. The shepherd's glass face reflected starlight. She aimed for that vacant mask, released. Arrow flew true, but inches from impact, the shepherd gestured. Ice panels blossomed, forming a shield. The arrow, embedded harmlessly. "Not enough," Arya muttered. The last jar of wildfire sat at her feet. Fuse stubby. She scooped it, met Asha's eye. Understanding passed. Ironborn warrior readied her throwing line. Arya stood on seat, ocean spray soaking trousers. Talon fingers closed the gap, each claw thick as mast. She lit fuse on torch, then hurled the jar in a high arc while Asha snapped the throwing line round its neck mid-flight, altering path just enough to curve over shield wall. The jar smashed against the shepherd's nape. Green conflagration swallowed the entity in screaming radiance. For a breath its body glowed emerald, Fisher's spider webbing. Then with a boom like cracking mountain it shattered. Shards scattered across sea, hissing into vapor. The ice-trapping bold wind sagged, liquefying. Longboat pitched violently. But a humming note lingered, thrumming through ribs. Some frequency the shepherd had sung into the water. In its absence, the scout larvae ceased movement, floating lifeless. The whirlpool calmed, releasing the drowned ships. Silence fell. Only panting and the creak of oars. By dawn, they towed survivors to White Harbor. Wyman the Three wept upon seeing Little Diver's colors, but thanked Arya through tears. "What threatens our nets will not breach again," she promised, though night's residue nested under her ribs. Back at Winterfell, council convened. Jon, Daenerys, Sansa, Lyanna, faces lined with new worry, heard Arya's report. Arianne laid old tomes. The shepherd, it seemed, was once priest-engineer of a vanished culture lost beneath polar ice, guardian of soul fairies. When the Night King fell, some deeper force awakened these guardians to seize mankind's warmth for unknown purpose. The shepherd's lattice mirrored the trench glyphs, Arya said, meaning the forces we fought are fragments of older design. Daenerys spread a map. If one shepherd found our coast, others may seek warmer seas. The Reach, the Stepstones, even Slaver's Bay. Jon tapped Valyria. Volcanic forges there could counter frost tech, but Valyria still teems with stone men and poisons. Arya fingered the Leviathan scale hung at her belt. "I'll send envoys to New Geese. Their pyropriests know volcanic rites." She hesitated. "And perhaps it's time to call the Iron Bank. Wars require coin, as well as courage." Damn Sadr. Sansa offered a parchment of statistics. Grain yields, smithing output, dragonglass reserves. We can arm 3 more fleets and 2 border hosts by harvest if Myrish engineers finish furnaces. Yet amid logistics, Arya sensed fatigue in every voice. The war refused to end. Victories only peeled back deeper layers. She left Hall early, stepping onto parapet where twilight sponged horizon purple. Snowmelt dripped from merlons. She closed her eyes, letting wind sing through her. Footsteps approached. Eddard's measured tread. He leaned on the battlement, hair whipped stray. You look across distances even when walls surround you, he observed. Distances keep knocking on the gate, she answered, half-smile. He produced a folded linen cloth. Inside lay a ring of plain iron set with knuckle-sized dragon-glass chip. I forged it at Lyanna's Isle for you. Not a crown too heavy, but a reminder. She slid it on index finger. Iron still warm. What does it remind? That hearths can be swords, and swords hearths. You taught me. He gazed at the western sky where stars bled through dusk. Mother, each day I watch you carry every weight. Let me ease one. She brow-cocked. Offer. I'll take Winterfell's chair in your stead while you journey south. Not as Lord Paramount, just steward. You carve paths. Let me tend gardens. He lifted shoulders almost shyly. I learned from the best. Pride burst bright behind her sternum. She gripped his hands. You share the seat already, but if standalone stewardship frees my stride, I accept. The pack thickens when roles rotate. They clasped forearms like equals. Overhead a meteor streaked, green tail cutting night. They watched, silently. Ghost pressed against her thigh. Warm. Preparations for Arya's southern voyage unfolded swift. 2 dragons would escort. Sansa would accompany to treat with Myrish bankers. Jory Umber thirsted to see jungles once only sung. Torrhen remained to guard Winterfell beside Eddard, his stalwart calm, a second keep wall. 3 mornings later, under banners bright in honey sun, the expedition set forth. Dragons overhead, a slender convoy of river galleys below, cargo holds packed with unworked Christ steel, and a cask of Leviathan shards for scholars. Arya rode at prow of lead galley, wind teasing braid ends, iron ring catching dawn glow day-dyed. They passed Moat Caelin's mossy towers where marsh birds cried. They sailed the Blue Fork, where fisherwomen raised nets in greeting. They skirted Maidenpool, and saw reconstruction in progress, smelters belching. Everywhere the realm healed, yet beneath hopeful bustle, word of shepherd rumors fluttered like bats in rafters. At Duskendale, a raven caught them. King Bran, writing from distant summer isles where he pursued arcane research, had glimpsed through green sight, tall shadows striding amber ice, eyes alight with inner dawn. He urged caution, and offered a riddle. Only the Forgiver breaks the endless cold. Arya read Bran's ink squiggles by lantern-eyed. Forgiver? She pondered long, but answers evaded. Upon reaching Blackwater Bay, they docked at King's Landing, now mostly rebuilt in dragonsteel and polished limestone. Market terraces buzzed. Children chased each other beneath still-scorched wing bones of Rhaegal's sibling Viserion, displayed as monument. Atop the Red Keep, Daenerys' banner fluttered next to the direwolf, stark reminder of joint rule. Queen Daenerys greeted Arya with quiet relief and wry smile. Come, I'll show you the vaults. We've repurposed wildfire stores into geothermal dynamos for smithies. Ironically, the old alchemist guild now warms orphanages. Together, they walked torchlit corridors, all new forging heat, subterranean hiss. In deepest chamber, glowed crucibles radiating orange. Daenerys gestured. We pour dragon glass into tempered steel frames. Blades lighter, less brittle. She lifted a longsword, edge midnight black etched with pale runes. Arya tested balance. Perfect. Name it, Daenerys invited. Arya considered, Bran's riddle echoing. Forgiver, she said. Word tasted unusual, but fitting. A blade to cut cycles rather than extend them. Daenerys inclined her head. Then may Forgiver sever Night's claim. Days became a blur of councils. Braavosi bankers counted risk. Myrish fire masters studied Leviathan shards. Dornish emissaries pledged sun-forged copper to line new shields. Still, every night, Arya returned to the riddle. Forgiver. Why would Bran link forgiveness to ending cold? Near the tourney grounds one evening, she found answer in an unlikely moment. A procession of freedmen passed, chanting thanks to Queen and Pack. Among them, Arya spotted a gaunt figure chained at wrists, escorted by city guard. She recognized him instantly, Gorn Spicer, once Bolton quartermaster who had torched Carhold's villages. He faced sentencing for war crimes. Crowds spat curses. Arya watched Spicer's sunken eyes flicker fear. Suddenly Bran's words pressed. Only the Forgiver breaks the endless cold. She stepped forward, raised her voice. Halt. Guards stiffened. She moved to Spicer. Why did you join Bolton flame bands? He swallowed. They threatened my daughters. Took them. Voice cracked. I surrendered to save them. They died anyway. I burned out my own heart that day. And oh. Arya studied him. Grief carved deeper than malice. She remembered her own lists of names, knights reciting wrath. Winter's cold thrived in vengeance fed. Forgiveness, not forgetting, but choosing not to let hate be lodestone, could starve the darkness. A weapon the shepherds could never wield. She turned to the guards. Deliver him to the Order of the Hand. He shall labor rebuilding the villages he burned. Under watch, but not under noose. Murmurs rippled. Some protest. Some approval. Arya felt weight shift inside, like ice cracking at river thaw. That night she wrote Bran. Riddle heeded. Forgiveness forged. Will the night wane now? She sealed with molten wax. But before Raven departed, alarm bells clanged across the city. 3 rapid peals. Arya dashed to battlements. Westward above the bay, emerged a fleet of black sails, no heraldry. Their masts bore ice spider flags. Shepherds had found the capital. Dragons roared off stable perches, wings beating sky. Arya sprinted for the armory, Forgiver in hand. She passed Sansa organizing civilians to catacombs, Jory Umber marshalling foot. Ironborn and city guard formed spear walls along quays. Arya leaped onto Drogon's saddle behind Daenerys without ceremony. Ready to carve forgiveness with fire? The queen cried over wind. Arya grinned sharp. Ready to teach cold the cost of hearts set free. They soared into evening blaze. Below, ghostly ships cracked as Dragonflame met resin hulls. But among them rose shepherd avatars riding frost beasts, each mirror mask. Arya's heart hammered. Yet she felt no dread, only resolve shaped by countless ledgers. Hearths. Hunts. The pack spanned earth and sky now, united by shared scars and chosen grace. Forgiver's dragonglass sang as she raised it toward the night, blade thirsty for dawn. And somewhere in distant Godswood, leaves rustled like cheers of ghosts redeemed. Ah-K. Ah-A-A. Smoke rolled over Blackwater Bay like storm-born silk, streaked copper by the last light of sunset. The thunder of trebuchets pounded from King's Landing's outer curtain, each counterweight clack echoing through the promenades in bone-shaking cadence. Fleets had clashed here many times, fire against wildfire, chain against sail, but never before had the sea itself come alive to join the quarrel. As Drogon's shadow glided across the crenellations, Arya felt the air's taste change. A brittle, salt-bitten cold that crept under armor seams and stiffened joints, as though her very blood wanted to slush. Below, black ships maneuvered more like reef sharks than craft of timber and rope. Frost spread spider-fast where they cut the water, and strange metallic keels grated through thin sheets of newly forming ice. Mirror-masked figures manned the decks, ice shepherds, or perhaps priests of some deeper power that had carved them from glacier and night. Their gestures wove runic blue sigils in the air. Each completed sign birthed a lance of white fire that hissed toward the walls, cutting stone like melting wax. Archers on the battlements tried returning salvos, but arrows turned brittle mid-flight. shattering before they struck. The enemy controlled the very temperature, weaponizing the void where warmth died. Drogon screamed. A reverberation that rattled shutters street deep. Pan Daenerys guided him lower, wings snapping. Rhaegal spiraled beside them bearing Jon. Golden fire poured in intersecting cones that incinerated 2 shepherd ships outright, hulls cracking like hot glass plunged in ice. But most vessels held, armored with layered obsidian scales, fused to frost steel. Flames licked impotently until Jon adjusted angle and focused his dragonfire on a single rune glowing at each prow. Under that pinpoint assault, the armor buckled and fracture lines bloomed. The rune must channel protective wards, break it, and heat mattered again. Arya gripped Drogon's spinal ridge with one hand, Forgiver clenched in the other. Even numbed by gale, she could feel the sword humming, a resonance pitched to some deep frequency nearer to heartbeat than sound. When Jon's dragonfire burst a prow rune, Arya saw a shepherd stagger, mask sizzling. Beneath the black glass shimmered eyes not blue but human brown. Shock pinched her gut. Were these thralls enslaved? Or volunteers? Either way, a flesh and blood being remained under the glacier shell. Queen's Landing Harbor erupted as wildfire teams triggered defensive charges across the waterline, a quilt of emerald fountains. For a breath, the bay became a mirror of northern lights. Vivid ribbons dancing, reflected in the facets of the enemy's hulls. Masts blackened. Frosty rigging sagged. A dozen mirror-masked figures cascaded over the gunwale. Fractured ice exoskeletons drifting like shed insect skins. Yet the shepherd flagship endured, a leviathan dwarfing the others, figurehead carved as a woman in tears, each tear a shard of pure sapphire. It advanced straight for the mudgate. From its forecastle rose an obelisk of translucent ice, laced with veins of volcanic glass. Contradictory elements fused. Only magic could weld such fuels. The obelisk housed swirling spheres, fertile pods ready to drop into the Undercity and hatch who knew what blight. Arya understood before Daenerys spoke. That tower must fall first. Take me closer, Arya shouted over wing roar. She could not explain why, but Forgiver felt drawn toward the obelisk like lodestone to iron. Daenerys met her gaze and nodded. No question. Drogon banked hard, a tidal wave of air buffeting roof tiles below. Rhaegal peeled left to strafe the escort vessels, giving Drogon a corridor. The shepherd flagship fired its own defense, geysers of vertical ice spearing from the sea as if Poseidon had blown a conch. Each pillar sheared upward, meeting Drogon's descent. The dragon twisted, limbs tucking. Ice splintered against scale but slowed momentum. Arya's teeth clicked. They could waste minutes dueling spires while the obelisk neared city walls. She unbuckled her strap. Daenerys sensed her intention. "You'll never clear the water," she shouted. Arya met the queen's incredulous anger with a grin disturbingly reminiscent of her wolf youth. "Watch me." She sprang. For a heartbeat she tumbled weightless between heaven and ruin. Then she angled her body, arms arrowed, sword sheathed to keep from skewering herself, legs bent at knees. Wind tore tears from her eyes. Below, an ice pillar erupted. She timed spin, boots skidding down its slick ridge, balance maintained by water dancer instinct honed decades before. She used the slope to redirect momentum, leaping again onto a lower fragment, then onto the mangled ratlines of a burned shepherd sloop. From there she sprinted, scarcely pausing where timbers smoldered. A final jump, and she landed upon the frost-slick deck of the flagship, with a crack that shot agony through her ankle, but left bones intact. Mirror-masked shepherds converged, brandishing jagged glaives, whose edges misted cold vapor. Arya rose, Forgiver glittering dark violet in reflected wildfire. The nearest shepherd lunged. She sidestepped, parried. Dragonglass met frost steel. A piercing chime rang. Forgiver's runes flared, eating the enemy's cold aura. Ice armor melted where the blade touched. Arya pivoted inside, slammed pommel against the mask. The glass spider webbed. Beneath it, a young woman's face stared, lips parted in silent scream before the helmet shattered entirely. She collapsed, not dead, but convulsing back into awareness, freed from whatever thrall bound her. "Forgiveness," Arya murmured, pushing hair from her eyes. "The blade releases, not kills." 2 more shepherds came. Arya danced amid their intersecting arcs, blade tracing crescents that kissed each mask precisely at its rune center. Each opponent fell, armor sloughing away, heat returning to cheeks. Their confusion cut deeper into Arya's resolve than any weapon. They were prisoners, drained of will. A roar shook the deck. Rhaegal, swooping low to rake escort vessels. Blue fire answered from below, missing but close enough to singe his left wing. Arya forced her focus. Obelisk. She sprinted up a curved stair. Frost crackled under boot. Sleet blew crosswise, formed by unnatural temperature gradients. Atop the forecastle platform, the obelisk thrummed like a living heart. Pods drifted inside, each orb holding a sliver of flame swirling within ice. Warmth imprisoned, ready to birth death. Bands of metal circled the structure at intervals. Wyvern-forged alloys known to withstand dragonfire. She saw no locking hinge. Drogon roared overhead. She waved sword to catch Daenerys' eye, then pointed at the obelisk's base where crystalline braces anchored to keel. Fire might cleave there. Yet, if dragonfire ruptured pods, they might explode in scalding frost, flash freezing the bay. A better way. Release the trapped heat harmlessly. Forgiver warmed in her grasp. But Bran's words again. Only the Forgiver breaks the endless cold. The sword had already shown one property, mask-shattering restoration. Perhaps it could also unseal imprisoned warmth. She placed its tip against the obelisk. The runes on blade and on glass aligned like puzzle halves. An echo sparked, a concordant hum resonant with something inside her bones. She pressed. Light pulsed down the blade into the pod lattice. Blue frost retreated from that point as circles of orange radiated outward. Webbing fissures raced the metal bands, cracking them open like walnut hulls. Pods began to thaw. Water beaded, hissed, steamed. A fissure burst. A river of warm vapor expelled upward in a column stripped of lethal enchantment. No explosion, only release. But the process was loud. Shepherds below roared, slinging polar bolts. One grazed her calf, numbness spreading. She locked knee to stay standing, continuing to drive energy. The obelisk groaned before collapsing in on itself, pods emptying harmlessly, shards tumbling to deck. Suddenly cold vacuum flooded space where heat had gathered. A backlash. Arya staggered. From the helm a towering shepherd emerged, armor layered thicker than the others, mask inlaid with twin spirals of sapphire. It carried no weapon save an hourglass filled with snow. Time itself felt to slow. The entity advanced, lifting the hourglass. Every grain glinted like star shard, each drop a second stolen. Arya's breath condensed in front of her face, lungs stalling. She lifted Forgiver, but arm muscles hardened to sluggish tallow. The shepherd whispered in a language that felt older than speech. "Release the warmth. You unmake the balance. Take balance. I reclaim warmth." Arya snarled. "Your balance is death." She summoned memory. Her father's laugh in the godswood, Joan's voice calling her little sister, Sansa's calm resilience, Lyanna's obsidian grin. Warmth flared in chest. She focused it along her arm, into Forgiver. Runes blazed, pushing heat outward. Frost on deck receded. The shepherd flung a hand. Shards of mirror glass spun toward her. She twisted, but leg slow. A shard sliced cheek, another shoulder. Pain spiked. Good. Pain meant alive. She dropped into low crouch, slid beneath second volley, came up inside its guard. Forgiver slashed. Not mask, but hourglass. Glass shattered. Snow burst upward like startled birds lost in wind. Shepherd recoiled, hands clawing empty air. Without the hourglass, its control fractured. Patches of armor turned dull, crumbling. Arya lunged, pommel smashing central rune. Crack. Dot. Blue fissures webbed across the mask. Inside, she saw a face, the eldest yet, skin like parchment, eyes sorrowful. A grandfather, maybe, not monster. Forgiver already did its work. Armor sloughed. The old man sagged to knees, tears steaming on cheeks where warmth returned. Arya caught him, eased him flat. He whispered one word. Selxiris, then died, freed from nightmare but heart too frail. A blast shook the hull. Drogon's flame washing the starboard side now that pods were neutralized. The ice plating melted fast, deckline sagging. Arya sprinted for railing, whistled. Rhaegal banked, Jon steering near. Arya vaulted, gripping harness strap. Jon's arms closed around her waist, catching with practiced battle reflex. Rhaegal surged skyward. Below, fire-consumed flagship, pods venting harmless mist. Freed shepherd prisoners crawled along scorched planks, dazed but alive. City skiffs zipped forth to drag them away before Pyre took hull. When the last ship cracked in half and slipped beneath Blackwater, trumpets on the wall blared victory. Crowds whooped. Dragons looped overhead, silhouettes black against peach dawn. Rhaegal landed inside the dragon pit grounds. Arya dismounted shakily. Jon steadied her. His grin split a soot-smeared face. "You always find higher ledges to jump from," he said. She panted. "Keeps the joints loose." Maester Sages hurried, tending her cheek and calf. No mortal frostbite. The numbness faded quickly under poultice. Daenerys strode across charred flagstones, Drogon behind like walking storm cloud. Her violet eyes glittered with relief and something deeper. Recognition. That sword. It sings another note above fire. A note that hushes hatred. Arya wiped blade clean, though no stain marked it. "Forgive her," she whispered. "It returns what cold steals." News sped. Shepherd fleet gone, pods disarmed, prisoners rescued. Losses heavy but city standing. While carpenters patched parapets and sailors netted debris, royal council convened inside a half-repaired throne room. Bran's raven had answered Arya's earlier letter, arriving in mid-battle. Sansa spread the scroll. "Forgiveness is the flame cold cannot eat. Each soul reclaimed is ice denied. In time warmth starves the shepherd queen." A hush fell. Jon's brow wrinkled. "Shepherd queen? We met only lieutenants." Bran's final line. "She is waking." Daenerys folded arms. "Then this assault was a probing thrust. She measures our resolve." "Them?" Arya considered the freed thralls, captives programmed to harvest warmth. Each new rescue starved the queen, but capturing thousands across seas seemed impossible. Maester Arion offered a brittle smile. "Legends speak of a place called Selxiris, beyond the ice shelf north of Ibn, where a star fell and carved a crater lake. Tales call it the Mirror Heart, gateway where frost spirits weave souls into glass. Perhaps our foe rouses there." The elderly shepherd's dying word echoed. Selxiris. Not random. Arya exhaled. "Then we sail the farther north, beyond maps." Sansa touched her wrist. "Even you cannot dance upon every distant brink. Winterfell needs its lady." Arya looked to Jon, to Daenerys. "Pack covers each other. I've walked many paths. Perhaps this one is mine, but with allies." She surveyed council. Asha, who thirsted for sea challenges. Lyanna Smiths forging heat-run bolts. Queen's dragons that could scour glacier citadels. "We strike where cold is born." Daenerys nodded. "Dragonfire at your side." Jon raised one brow. "And direwolf spirit." Sansa sighed, acceptance shading worry. "Then I will secure south and raise envoys. Forgiveness must spread as fast as winter's rumor. If shepherds feed on hate, let them starve amidst mercy." The plan grew. A coalition fleet, ironborn hulls clad in dragonglass scales, Dornish sand skimmers hauling wildfire, Cohoric pyresmiths and Volantine heat siphon mages. Arya would lead vanguard aboard Windspite refitted for polar gales, Asha as admiral, Jon and Daenerys commanding dragons above. Rhaegal's wing healed, Drogon hungered for challenge. Before departure, Arya walked the capital streets at dusk. Rebuilding thrummed. Bakers offered free loaves to volunteers. Freed shepherd thralls swept charred alleyways, guided by septons. Children chalked wolves and dragons on brick walls, adding hearts between them. Forgiveness already sowed seeds. Near the Blackwater, she found Spicer, former Bolton arsonist, hauling rubble. He paused, wiping soot. "Lady Stark," he greeted respectfully. "Stone's heavy, but lighter than guilt." She smiled gently. "Guilt isn't a chain if you use it to build." He nodded. Set hands back to work. That night she stood atop Aegon's high hill. Stars iced the firmament. She drew Forgiver, letting starlight ripple along edge. She breathed, slow. Somewhere far north, a shepherd queen stirred, dreaming of ice dominion. Arya felt no dread, only a throb of fierce purpose. Forgiver was more than metal. It was the memory of every kindness chosen over wrath. That memory would be the spark in a realm of cold. Bootsteps behind, John Dotal. "Ships leave at dawn tide. Thought you'd be here." "Had to listen to the wind," she said. "What did it say?" "That home is the hearth you carry, not the walls you guard." She sheathed the blade. "And dragons, wolves, and queens may yet teach the world its worth." John huffed a laugh. "Sounds like a Stark proverb." "Maybe it will be." They looked east, where first hints of dawn bled silver. He placed his hand on her shoulder, a pact renewed yet again between wanderer and watchman. When pale fire crept over rooftops, bells rang the call to harbor. Fleet sails unfurled, midnight cloth emblazoned with interlaced direwolf and dragon circling a sunburst of forgiving flame. As Arya strode the gangplank, crowds cheered with voices hoarse but hopeful. Children tossed petals, petals frosted then thawed, fluttering like snow that chose to melt before touching ground. Windspite's lines cast off. Gulls wheeled. Dragons roared. And so the lady who once learned to count barley and imagine sword blows in equal breath embarked upon her furthest road, a road toward Selk's Iris, where she would ask Winter's sovereign one final question: what power remains to those who refuse to hate? The sea opened, slate and immense, swallowing the fleet's reflection into its hidden depths. Above, dawning light struck Forgiver's runes, and for an instant they glowed not scarlet nor white, but pure living gold, the color of hearthfire offered freely to traveler and stranger alike.